My name is Marilyn Schaefer-Mao, and we are taking on a little road trip today. And we're out in the country in a very special place. Now, Patty Benson is here with me. She is the camera person, and maybe she'll wave her hand in front of the camera later. And we also have one of our board members here, Carla, and this is her first time visiting this particular site. So we're once again trying our hand at sharing local history through video stories. So today we're going to share another chapter in the history of Pomme de Terre, which is located in Section 18, Pelican Lake Township, where we are today. On this quiet hill, we find the gravesite of two soldiers who were killed May 2nd of 1863 while they were stationed at a very primitive outpost. They were members of Minnesota Company B, 8th Infantry Regiment. And years before, this place was the site of a remote relay station, which was already a busy place during the mid to late 1850s. It was an important stop for land speculators and government surveying groups, and most importantly, the fur traders who were traveling from Pembina on the Canadian border to Fort Snelling. But in 1859, the United States government contracted to have a road built, and I say that with quotation marks, to accommodate increasing traffic heading west. It was a very bumpy, hard to travel kind of a trail. But the Burbank Stagecoach Company was really eager to expand its business into the Red River area using this new trail. However, events were taking place in other parts of our country at this time, as well as in Minnesota. Many Minnesota men had already enlisted to fight in the Civil War in the South, and that started April of 1861. But on August 18, 1862, an armed conflict began at the Lower Sioux Agency along the Minnesota River in the southern part of our state. Dakota families were waiting for their monthly allotment of supplies and money, which were part of the treaty agreements which they had been assigned between the U.S. government and various Native American communities. This was at the time when they gave up thousands of acres of land. Sadly, supplies were already in the storage agency, but the money hadn't arrived yet. So the agents and the other government representatives were really reluctant to start distributing supplies until the money came. Little Crow, one of the most well-known Dakota chiefs, said later that his people were literally starving to death, and due to a bad harvest, small farms for planting crops, and poor hunting on the reservations, as well as bad weather. Consequently, several white people were killed by young Dakota men, and this was the start of the uprising. The money arrived the next day, but it was too late. If there is a good aspect to this conflict, it lasted only 5 weeks, in comparison to the Civil War that lasted over 4 years. However, many lives were lost during the fighting in those 5 weeks. But soon a directive was sent, which was to commanding officers that bulletproof stockades were to be constructed as a result of the attacks by the Dakota. And this line of stockades was supposed to be built along that 1859 trail. And again, think I-94 in today's terminology. Governor Alexander Ramsey was concerned there might be further attacks against white settlers in other parts of the state. So if one were to draw a line from St. Cloud through Alexandria to Pomme de Terre and on farther west toward Breckenridge, the Ojibwe were occupants of the northern half of our state, and the Dakota mainly lived in the southern part. So the Ojibwe were not part of the uprising. When the 8th Regiment arrived at this site from Fort Ripley in January of 1863, they immediately began to build a stockade with several barracks, a commissary, an arsenal, stables, and blockhouse. And we need to keep in mind they actually marched all the way from Ripley through Fort Pomme de Terre in January and probably took a whole month in order to get here by the time they could get all their supplies moved from one place to another. So in addition to being carpenters and builders, they also had guard duty as well as drills because they had to remain alert. There were often other military units that stopped overnight. Because travel between Fort Abercrombie and Fort Snelling became more frequent with a constant bringing of supplies back and forth. So in April, when the snow and ice began to melt, the men often went hunting and fishing in Pomme de Terre Lake, which was south of here, or west of the river, and they were both about a mile from the fort. So they enjoyed picking berries to add to their usual fare, but on the morning of May 2nd, 1863, Private Adam Hair, age 34, and Corporal Zenus Blackman, age 31, decided to venture out looking for goose eggs. Unfortunately, they were unaware that there were Indians scouting out the area, so they were taken by surprise and killed. Their deaths were soon discovered because they were not very far from the fort. So Captain McClarty, the fort commander, quickly organized a search party to go after the victims. The bodies were immediately returned to the fort, where the two men were buried under a wagon box turned upside down. But in addition to Adam and Zenus, two more deaths were soon discovered by soldiers, we think maybe Abercrombie soldiers, because they were waiting for them to arrive, but they found them at Dayton's Crossing, which was located about 20 miles west of here, and is south of the present-day Fergus Falls. Private Comfort Ludington was 26, and he had been given permission by Captain McClarty to accompany a teamster by the name of Silas Foote. He was taking steers to Fort Abercrombie. Through the years, in many different publications, it's been thought that Comfort Ludington was also buried at this fort. But we have eyewitnesses' accounts from Lieutenant Thomas Harris and Mrs. Isabel Fuller Arnold, and they do not support that theory. Harris was from Chatfield, which is in Fillmore County, where Adam Hare's wife Frankie lived. Harris wrote a letter to the local newspaper, and he gave all the details of the condition of the two bodies, as well as personal observations of that day. Mrs. Arnold was Adam Hare's sister-in-law. He was married to her sister Frankie. Isabel was present at the time of the tragedy, and in an interview in 1932, when she was 95 years old, she gave detailed accounts of events at the fort and described the life of a wife of a military facility. 8 days later, she passed away. How fortunate that she was so eager and so able to provide us with such a personal look at life at Fort Pomme de Terre in 1863. Many soldiers in this unit were from Fillmore or Olmsted counties, and many of them were related and would have been witness to this tragedy. There were also newspaper articles and military correspondence giving the details of this event. 3 Dakota men were later apprehended, and one was wearing a special shirt belonging to Adam Hare. Now, Silas Foote's body might have been taken to the Melrose area where his family lived. According to Find a Grave, his wife with several children mentioned that he had been killed by Indians when taking cattle to Fort Abercrombie, although none of them mentioned a specific burial spot. Also, given the amount of travel that there was on the Pembina and Abercrombie trails in this area, we expect that many who became sick and died might very well have been buried at the side of the road. I actually searched for information about Ludington and Foote at the Otter Tail County Historical Society, and they were very interested in the Dakota Crossing incident, but there was not one word about the killing of those two men. And I can guarantee that their interest is piqued, and I'm sure that they will be digging in to try to find some information. So at least so we can know where they went or what happened to them. About 66 years after the events of May 2nd, 1863, in other words, in 1929, apparently a group of people in Elbow Lake were reminiscing about the good old days, and the topic of the fort came up. According to several local newspapers, including the Grant County Herald, possibly some county commissioners decided to approach members of the Elbow Lake American Legion, who subsequently decided to investigate the rumors about those soldiers who were supposedly buried at the fort. So they contacted Rose Burns Johnson, the only surviving child of David and Rachel Burns, who had moved into the fort after the military left. She had grown up at the fort while it was a stagecoach stop and an inn, and she used to walk by the burial spot with her father, and she often placed flowers on the grave. Rose accompanied the Legion members and was able to come within 10 feet of the gravesite. No doubt whatever marker had been used to designate the place was long gone after 66 years. But after Rose remembered that there were 2 oak trees growing nearby. Now again, in 66 years, those trees must have grown tremendously, but there must have been some other indication to her that she was looking in the right spot. After investigating the remains, the bodies were returned to the temporary grave, again until 1933, when this monument that we have here, that will be talking about, was erected to honor Adam and Zenus. It also includes a plaque to commemorate his resting place. Unfortunately, we have not been able to find any Legion records or county records detailing this event, but there were several state newspapers that were quite interested in this story. Not only just Elbow Lake and Fergus, but it went statewide, because it was quite a sensation that bodies from that time period would have been as significant as it was, if they were. We've also learned the names of local men who took a leadership role in trying to discover the facts of this historical event. So we will continue to gather information in order, hopefully, to fill in and tell you what the rest of the story is. There's a great deal of pertinent information available in line from many sources these days if you are at all interested in learning more. So just kind of Google and see what you come up with. But I would suggest you head to the Grant County Historical Society, because there are many, many folders with all kinds of information from every source we could possibly think of that has been put in for use and for research. So Grant County Historical Society is very appreciative that a young man named Ken, he took the project of trimming back trees and weeds and brush in order to clear out this lovely memorial to honor those 2 Civil War soldiers. He put up this picket fence surrounding the original wire fence, and he enclosed patio blocks to allow space for visitors to read or reflect on the important history of this place. So we decided today the only thing missing might be 2 nice park benches. It would make it even more convenient because you could sit and enjoy the nature that is surrounding this place. He's done an excellent job, and we're so pleased that he chose to take on this project in order to earn his Boy Scout Eagle badge. So congratulations to Ken and to other members of his Scout troop for doing a great job. And I'm just going to read very quickly to you what it says on this plaque. In memory of Corporal Zenus Blackman, age 31, and Private Adam Hair, 34. Company D, Minnesota Regiment, garrisoned at Pomme de Terre stockade, killed May 2nd, 1863 by Indians, and buried here near the stockade. This tablet was erected by the Carl A. Hansen Post, American Legion, Elbow Lake, Minnesota, 1933. So over the years, there have been rumors that it's possible that 4 men were buried at Fort Pomme de Terre: Adam Hair, Zenus Blackman, Comfort Ludington, and Silas Foote. And in addition to them, there are also 2 men from Hatch's Battalion, Privates Kirby and Tibbets. And the Hatch's Battalion were troops that closed down the fort, and they prepared it for the Burns family to take it over, because by that time it had either been traded, some land had been traded with Burbank, and others had been bought from him. But there is no evidence to support this idea. And as a counterpoint, we know that Mrs. Anna Strange McClarty, wife of the commanding officer, died very unexpectedly in March of 1864. and her body was taken back to Chatfield, where she's buried. So, in some cases, people were returned to the place where their families lived. And because of first-hand accounts of those witnesses to these events and based on newspaper articles and military correspondence, we're pretty confident that only Adam and Zenus are buried at this memorial site. Now, both the memorial monument and the fort site are on the National Register of Historic Places, but they're privately owned, private property, so permission is needed in order to visit these sites. But the Grant County Historical Society and I personally would really like to thank the owners for graciously letting us visit with small as well as relatively large groups of people, some of whom have arrived by school bus. It's obvious that local residents as well as visitors to our communities really appreciate learning about these local stories. And fortunately, as I said before, the Historical Society has a tremendous collection of primary resources and photos which help to preserve and share the important stories of this part of Grant County. And we welcome people who have more information or photos or anything that they would like to share with us, because that helps to add to the story. And I guess I would like to say thank you very much for joining us on this journey back in time. And remember, local history matters.